Most people wouldn't call it much. 10 acres of dry land, one crooked barn, a wood-framed house with peeling blue paint, and a gravel road that hadn't seen pavement in decades. But to Clay Rivers, it was everything. The kind of everything that doesn't shout or shine, it just endures. A place where every corner held a memory, and every crack in the porch wood told a story. He was 56, a retired electrician with callous hands and a stubborn streak as wide as the county line. His wife had passed 7 years ago, and cancer and the quiet had never left since. It settled into the walls like dust. Their kids came by on holidays sometimes, always meant to visit more often, but life happens, and Clay never held it against them. He understood. He'd built this life on being self-reliant, even if that meant being alone most of the time. There were things here that didn't exist anywhere else. The old chicken coop he and his son had rebuilt with their bare hands one summer, hammering until dusk. The peach tree they planted on their daughter's 10th birthday. The wind chimes still hanging in the oak tree out front. His wife's favorite sound when the breeze picked up at sunset. Some days Clay would stand there and wait for that wind like it was a sign she was still close. He wasn't a man who needed much. His routine never changed. Feed the animals, fix the gate, coffee by 7 o'clock, always black. He talked to Boone, his old mutt, like he was human. And Boone, faithful as ever, listened like he understood every word. This land was peace, the kind of peace that didn't care what the world outside was doing. Before we go any further, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any more HOA horror stories. Now let's get back to it. But peace has a way of being temporary, especially when someone else thinks they can take it. And Clay was about to learn just how far some people will go when they think the land under your boots belongs to them. It was early March when Clay first saw them, 3 men in neon orange vests, standing just beyond the fence line, near the far edge of his pasture. They didn't knock, didn't wave, just stood there holding clipboards and muttering to each other like they owned the place. Clay was on his second cup of coffee, standing in his kitchen window, barefoot, watching them through a thin haze of morning fog. Boone let out a low growl near the door. Clay didn't say a word. He recognized the look. City men, hired by someone with money, someone who wasn't from around here. They weren't lost. They were here on purpose. He walked out onto the porch, slow and deliberate, arms crossed over a flannel shirt that had seen better days. Boone padded beside him, tense. The men didn't look up. They planted their little stakes in the earth, bright pink flags with markings Clay couldn't read. Some had ribbons attached, fluttering in the wind like they were claiming the land for something. He didn't like it. But he didn't ask questions either. This was his father's rule. Don't stir the pot unless someone's trying to steal the stove. So Clay just watched and remembered, because the last time someone came out here measuring things, it was 20 years ago. And that guy had tried to rezone his orchard into a utility easement. Clay ran him off with a shovel and never heard from the county again. The men left after an hour, left their flags behind, left their tire tracks too, cut deep into the side ditch like a scar. 3 days later, there were more flags, a whole row of them, cutting a crooked path along the back edge of his land, zigzagging like they couldn't make up their minds. One was driven right into the trunk of his pecan tree. That one he pulled out with both hands. The flag snapped off in the wind. He held the little plastic stick like it was poison, tossed it in the burn barrel, and didn't say a word. But they came back. Every time he cleared them out, more appeared. Pink, yellow, even a blue one, laminated with a tag that said, "Proposed Line B, confirm easement." Clay had lived here for over 25 years. Ain't no one ever mentioned an easement. Not in the sale, not on the map, not in the deed his daddy gave him before he passed. Later that week, Pete's neighbor from 3 parcels over pulled up in his old Silverado, and rolled down the window. "You see all that business behind your fence?" Pete asked, jerking a thumb toward the tree line. "They sold that whole stretch. Some developer out of Austin, Silver, something. Gonna be a subdivision, 100 homes, I heard." Clay stood at the gate, hand resting on the latch. He squinted at the flags in the distance. "Figures," he muttered, spitting in the dirt. Pete chuckled nervously. "They say it's gonna be fancy. Pool, dog park, community gardens, all that HOA crap." Clay didn't respond, just kept looking past the fence, past the pasture, past the tree line that had always marked the end of his world. That night, Clay found a thick envelope tucked inside his mailbox. Logo on the front, Silverwood Estates. He opened it on the porch. Boone lay beside him, snoring. Inside, a glossy brochure filled with pictures of smiling families and 2-story homes with flower boxes. And a note. "Dear neighbor," it began, "we're excited to welcome you to the future of blended rural living. While your parcel will not be affected, we wanted to share the vision of Silverwood Estates with you." He didn't finish it. Folded the paper once, tossed the whole damn thing into the fire pit, but that sentence stuck in his head like a splinter. Your parcel will not be affected. It was the kind of sentence people only write when they know they're lying. And somewhere deep inside him, Clay knew, they weren't just building next to his land. They were getting ready to cross a line. And no matter how many flags they planted, this land had already been spoken for. It started before the sun came up. Clay was still in bed when the first sound rolled through the floorboards. A deep, mechanical growl that didn't belong. At first he thought it was thunder, but the sky was clear. Boone raised his head from the foot of the bed, ears perked. Then came the second sound, the sharp metallic crash of something slamming into the earth. Boone barked, low and uncertain. Clay threw off the covers and stepped into his boots. Outside, the horizon was still blue-gray, that early kind of morning light that belongs to farmers and men with regrets. But the field at the back of his property was lit up like a job site. It wasn't just one machine, it was a line of them. Yellow bulldozers, backhoes, graders, all crawling across the ground like ants with steel claws. He stood on his porch in silence, arms folded, watching as the first trees came down. Pines that had stood tall longer than he'd been alive, torn up by the roots like they were nothing. The sound was like bones snapping. Dull, final, disrespectful. Boone paced behind him, whining. Clay didn't move. He didn't yell, didn't stop out there and make a scene. He just watched, jaw clenched, the muscles in his face twitching every time a tree hit the ground. By mid-morning, the trucks were coming in waves. Big rigs carrying concrete forms, dump trucks full of gravel, surveyors marking lines on fresh dirt. The wind picked up and carried the dust straight across his fence and into his yard. It clung to the porch steps, the chicken wire, even the leaves of his wife's peach tree. Clay went inside and washed his face twice that day. The grit wouldn't come off. He called the county after lunch. Got transferred 3 times before someone answered who actually knew what Silverwood Estates was. The voice on the other end was young, too polite, too rehearsed. "Mr. Rivers, I can confirm that the development is in full compliance with county code. We understand the disruption this may cause, but this phase is temporary. We just ask for your patience." Clay didn't respond. He just hung up. That night, Boone wouldn't settle. He kept barking toward the back field, toward the machines still idling in the distance with their amber lights blinking like eyes in the dark. Clay didn't sleep. By the end of the week, the whole back line of trees was gone, bulldozed clean. A raw strip of naked earth now ran the length of his property, and the wind howled through it like a wound. He tried to ignore it. He really did. He built a small barrier behind the chicken coop, used scrap plywood and old metal sheets, nothing fancy, just something to muffle the roar. But the sound always found a way in. He took to wearing his old job site headphones, the kind he used when he worked under transformers. He wore them while tending the garden, wore them while feeding the chickens, wore them inside the house sometimes, even when there was no noise at all. His body adjusted to it, but something in him didn't. The worst part wasn't the noise. It was the rhythm of it all. Every morning, like clockwork, 6 o'clock a.m., engines firing up. Every evening, like routine, lights cutting through the trees as the last trucks rolled out. There was something arrogant in the consistency, something hostile in how predictable it all became, like they knew he'd eventually stop resisting. Time passed, but not the way it used to. What used to be woods was now rooftops. A horizon once filled with trees and birdsong was now covered in siding, HVAC units, and back porches stacked too close together. Nearly a year after the first bulldozer touched dirt, the houses went up. They rose fast, too fast, like weeds after a rainstorm. Bright, sterile, uniform. Clay watched from his porch, morning after morning, as one identical home after another appeared like copy-pasted boxes. Beige siding, black trim, white vinyl fences that didn't touch the ground quite right. They called it Silverwood Estates. To Clay, it looked like a virus that didn't know when to stop. Then the people came. SUVs and moving trucks lined the fresh concrete roads. New neighbors stepped out with cameras and baby strollers. Someone had balloons tied to their mailbox. A kid rode his bike up and down the cul-de-sac like it was a racetrack. At first, they stayed over on their side, but it didn't last. Joggers started using Clay's gravel road like it was part of the neighborhood trail. Teens walked past the gate with earbuds in, never looking up. One Saturday, a group of boys cut across his side pasture to chase a drone that had drifted too far. The final straw came on a Tuesday morning. Clay was in the orchard, pruning back a row of branches that had overgrown the fence. Boone was sniffing around the tall grass when a figure darted through the trees. It was a young man, backpack slung over one shoulder. Probably 17, maybe 18. He didn't even slow down, just sprinted across the yard like it was a shortcut to school. Clay shouted, loud, "Hey!" The young man skidded to a stop, startled. Boone barked so hard his paws left the ground. The boy froze, unsure if he'd made a mistake. He had. "You see a sidewalk out here?" Clay snapped. The young adult shouted back, "Try to catch me, old man," without looking back. Clay stood there for a long time after in shock, the shears still in his hand, his chest tight with something that wasn't just anger, it was invasion. That night, he started drawing up plans. He drove into town the next morning, bought cedar boards, steel posts, concrete mix, picked up extra bolts and a pack of new drill bits. When the cashier asked what he was building, Clay just said, "A reminder." By the weekend, the new fence was up, taller, heavier, impenetrable. It didn't match the soft picket ones across the road. It was real, unwelcoming by design. He bolted a sign onto the center post. "That's pre-Mediterranean. No tourista passing. Not part of HOA." He stood back and looked at it when it was done. Boone sat beside him, panting. The wind rustled the orchard leaves behind them. For the first time in months, Clay felt like he could breathe. 2 days later, he was locking the gate when a silver Prius rolled to a stop on the roadside, the driver's window lowered with an electronic hum. It was a woman in her late 30s, fresh makeup, HOA welcome packet probably still in her passenger seat. "You're not part of the HOA?" she asked, forcing a smile. "You know, it might be easier if you just joined. Makes things simpler for everyone." Clay didn't say anything right away. He just looked at her through the chain link, looked past the sunglasses and the forced politeness, looked at the perfectly rehearsed condescension of someone who thinks they're being helpful when they're really just trying to own the space. "No," he said flatly. She blinked. "Oh, just thought. I'm not interested," Clay added, voice firmer now. "Never was, never will be." She opened her mouth like she was going to say something else, but thought better of it. The window rolled up. The Prius drove off. Clay didn't watch her go. He just turned back toward his fence and gave the bolt one last crank. It wasn't much, but it was his line in the sand, and he wasn't moving it for anyone. The envelope was heavier than normal. It came on a Thursday morning, slid halfway into the rusted mailbox Clay had hammered into the post 20 years ago, the kind of envelope that didn't fold easily, with a glossy return label in bold print that felt more like a summons than a neighborly note. The top corner read, Silverwood Estates Homeowners Association Certified Communication. Clay turned it over in his hands, standing in the gravel. Boone sniffed at the edge of the mailbox. The envelope had weight, not just in paper but in tone. It was the kind of thing that told you up front, we're not asking. He opened it with a pocket knife on the porch. Inside were 3 typed pages, professionally formatted, triple-spaced, the kind of document written by someone who didn't expect to be ignored. It started politely enough, too politely. Dear Mr. Webers, as an adjacent participant in the evolving Silverwood Estates community, we are reaching out in the spirit of mutual cooperation to address a small boundary matter. He stopped reading after the first paragraph, but then he saw the phrase that made his chest tighten. Your recently modified rear fence appears to encroach on land designated for community enjoyment under the Silverwood Estates Greenbelt Initiative. Community enjoyment? His fence? They were serious. The letter went on, referencing plat numbers, section codes, and zoning language that didn't belong in a neighborhood dispute. It spoke of coordinated compliance and shared boundary aesthetics, suggested that he submit any further construction plans to the HOA board for alignment with community guidelines. Clay laughed. Out loud. He didn't mean to. It just came out, short and bitter, the sound of disbelief from a man who had thought the world still worked on common sense. Boone jumped a little at the noise. Clay folded the letter once, not even creasing it properly, and tossed it into the junk drawer in the kitchen with the old batteries and expired coupons, slid it under the rubber bands, and let the drawer slam shut. But that night, it got to him. The air was quiet, but his head wasn't. He poured himself a small glass of whiskey, sat at the dining table with the deed, spread it out flat, ran his fingers over the name printed in faded ink, Clayton Rivers, and the hand-drawn boundaries his father had helped sketch during escrow nearly 30 years ago. The line was clear, always had been. His land ran from the gravel road to the back creek. No breaks, no easements, no question. But now there was a question, wasn't there? That's how it always starts, he thought. Not with a bulldozer or a court order, with a letter, piece of paper written in nice fonts by people who don't shake hands, people who smile while circling your name on a zoning map in a meeting you're never invited to. He sat back in his chair, looked out the window toward the back pasture. It was dark now, but he knew what was there, the orchard. The line he'd always known was his. But if they were already drawing new lines on their maps, how long before they started trying to redraw them in real life? Boone groaned and shifted under the table, sensing the change in the room. Clay reached for the drawer, pulled the letter back out, read it again, word for word. And when he was done, he folded it neatly this time, slid it back into the envelope, tucked it away in a file cabinet labeled Property Important, because now it was starting. The second letter came 10 days later. Same certified envelope, same embossed HOA seal, but this time the tone wasn't pretending. Clay found it in the mailbox on a Tuesday, still early enough in the morning that the grass was wet and Boone's paws left tracks on the porch. He brought it inside, didn't even take off his boots, just stood at the kitchen counter, opening the flap with a slow, steady hand. No Dear Mr. Rivers, no neighbor. This one got right to the point. Notice of non-compliance. This serves as a formal warning that your rear fence line violates Municipal Code 5.42a. Failure to comply within 14 business days may result in corrective penalties including fines, property reassessment, and enforcement by county zoning officers. We urge you to coordinate resolution to avoid escalation. Clay didn't laugh this time. He read the whole thing, every word, then read it again, slower. He took the letter into the living room and laid it side by side with his deed. The boundaries hadn't changed. Not in 25 years, not in 50. That fence line wasn't just legal, it was personal. He didn't pace, didn't curse. He was past that. He turned on the old laptop, the one with the broken hinge that only worked if he jammed a folded napkin under one corner. He scanned the new letter, then scanned his deed again, added it to the same USB stick labeled Clay_land_backup. That name didn't feel like overkill anymore. Then he opened a blank document and typed a response. No pleasantries, just facts. To whom it may concern, I am not a member of the Silverwood Estates Homeowners Association. My property boundaries have not changed since the original purchase and are recorded with the county. Your repeated attempts to assert authority over my land are unrecognized and unwelcome. Do not contact me again. He printed it, signed it, and drove it into town himself. Stood in line behind a teenager mailing college forms and a man returning a broken weed whacker. When the postal clerk asked if he wanted a tracking number, Clay said, "Damn right I do." That night, Clay called his daughter. She picked up on the second ring. He explained the situation briefly, like a man who didn't want to relive it out loud. Told her about the second letter, the threat of enforcement, the zoning code nonsense. There was a pause on the line. "Dad, you need a lawyer." "I don't need a damned lawyer," he said. "Seriously, if they're threatening action, that's not small stuff. This is real." He grunted. "If I lawyer up now, they win. That's how they do it. Scare people into fighting shadows." "You don't fight shadows, Dad. You prepare for the storm." He didn't answer right away, just scratched Boone behind the ears and stared out the window. "Not yet," he finally said. "Let's see if they got the message." They didn't. 6 days later, the third letter arrived. This one was thicker. It had maps inside, highlighted sections, official-looking language printed on cheap paper, like the weight of the words was supposed to make up for the flimsiness of the truth. Easement Descript, Pansy Notice, Zone 3B. Due to inconsistencies between the recorded plat and recent visual inspections, we request immediate review of your fencing placement in reference to a legacy easement connected to Silverwood Estates. Non-compliance may result in forced removal or property citation under Local Ordinance 3.08c. Forced removal, they'd dropped all pretense now. Not ask, not suggest, force. Clay didn't finish reading, didn't need to. He folded the papers neatly, not because he respected them, but because crumpling felt like surrender. He placed them back in the envelope, then locked it in the drawer under the kitchen sink where the flashlight and .22 revolver stayed. That night, Clay didn't. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Boone snoring gently beside him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the fence, saw the orchard, saw the flags from a year ago that nobody asked to plant. He saw his land, not as it was, but as someone else had already decided it should be. And in that moment, he knew this wasn't about fences anymore. This was about erasure. And if he didn't push back soon, there'd be nothing left to protect. The deputy didn't smile. He didn't explain either. Just pulled into the driveway in a white Ford Cruiser, dust trailing behind his tires. Parked halfway between the mailbox and the house, engine idling like he didn't plan to stay long. Clay was on the porch, oiling the hinges on the screen door. Boone barked once, low and suspicious. The deputy stepped out slowly, hand resting near his hip. Not aggressive, just trained. He looked like a man who'd done this before. "You Clayton Rivers?" Clay stood, nodded. The deputy held out a thick manila envelope, sealed and stamped with the kind of authority you don't argue with. "By order of Silverwood Estates Homeowners Association. Civil filing, you've been served." If that was it, no further words, no sympathy, just protocol. Clay took the envelope without blinking. Didn't thank him, didn't curse, just watched as the cruiser reversed down the gravel drive and disappeared in a cloud of beige dust. He didn't open it right away. He stood there for almost a full minute, envelope in hand, Boone circling at his heels like he felt it too. Something final had just arrived. Then Clay went inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and peeled the flap open like he was gutting something already dead. First page, court filing header. Second page, complaint. Third page, plat map. It was all there in black and white. The Silverwood Estates HOA was suing for ownership of 2.14 acres of land they now claimed was part of a recreation greenbelt easement, meant for public use by subdivision residents. Their argument? That the back section of Clay's fence had been illegally erected across territory mistakenly assumed to be privately owned, and that continued use constituted willful trespass against the community's common assets. They wanted the court to strip the title and grant the land to the HOA. Clay didn't explode right away. It was a slow burn, like a fuse on wet dynamite. He stood up, pushed the chair back so hard it scraped a line into the wood floor, walked out to the porch, still holding the papers, laid them flat on the railing like they needed to be seen in daylight to be real, and then he snapped. He slammed his fist against the porch post, once, twice, then grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it across the yard. The legs splintered on the edge of the steps. Boone barked, startled, then bolted down the trail into the woods. "Come take it then," Clay shouted into the empty air. His voice echoed once, bounced off the tree line, then disappeared like everything else that had been his. He sat down hard on the steps, breathing heavy, head low. That night, he drank. Not to sleep. Not to numb. Just to stop the gears from grinding long enough to think. Bottle of brown liquor his son had brought from Kentucky sat untouched in the cabinet for 2 years. Clay poured 2 fingers, then 4. Then he pulled open the old storage bin under the bed and found what he was looking for. His father's map, drawn by hand, faded in places, but the lines were still visible. The creek, the back fence, the orchard, 25 acres, not 10. His father had marked the whole thing, what he bought, what he claimed, and what the county, for reasons Clay never asked about, had only taxed in part. He laid it across the table and stared at it, eyes swimming with whiskey and rage. He thought about the trees that used to stand out there, thought about the orchard. I thought about the kid who cut across his land like it was a shortcut to soccer practice. They'd called it a mistake. They were suing him for his land and calling it a clerical error. That's when the words slipped out. Quiet. Cracked. Like they surprised even him. "I need help." Boone came back around midnight, muddy and tired. Clay opened the door and let him in. Neither of them said anything. Clay didn't tell anyone for 3 days. Not his daughter. Not Pete down the road. Not even Boone, who watched him pace the porch every evening like something was chewing at his insides. He kept rereading the lawsuit, flipping between the plat map and his father's hand-drawn lines like the truth would jump out on the 7th or 8th try, when it never did. The county was quiet, the developers were quiet, but that envelope on his table, it wasn't quiet anymore. So, on a Sunday night, after 2 cups of bitter coffee and 1 more reread of the easement code they cited, Clay did something he never thought he'd do. He opened Facebook, not to scroll, not to post photos, just to find someone who'd been through something close. He typed it into the search bar, HOA Horror Stories. A private group popped up, 46,000 members. Banner photo was a handmade protest sign that said, "My HOA fined me for breathing too loud." It made him snort, just a little. He requested to join, got approved in an hour, posted in the group at 11:42 p.m. Live in Texas, got 10 acres, never joined the HOA next door. They just sued me for 2 acres. I've had for 25 plus years. Say it's part of their greenbelt. I've got my deed. They've got lawyers. Anyone ever seen something like this before? He hit post and closed the laptop. Didn't expect much. The next morning, the comments were flooding in. Over 300 in 6 hours. And climbing. People from across the country. Arizona, Georgia, California. Sharing stories of HOAs gone wild. Playground lawsuits, mailbox inspections. One guy said they tried to evict him over a garden gnome. But one comment stood out. Short, direct. I'm a real estate lawyer. You're not crazy. They're bluffing something, DM sent. The name. Eli Navarro. Clay clicked the message icon. There it was. Hey, Mr. Rivers. I saw your post. I'm a land use and title attorney, licensed in Texas. I just opened my own firm. No charge. I like cases like this. They smell. Clay raised an eyebrow. Who the hell liked this kind of case? He clicked on Eli's profile. Young guy. Maybe early 30s. Looked like someone who drank cold brew on purpose. His law firm's page had a tagline. We don't just read the fine print. We weaponize it. Clay almost laughed. Still, something about the message felt real. No links, no pitch, just interest. He wrote back one sentence. You want to look at the case? Fine, I'll send you the filing. Eli responded in less than 5 minutes. Who? And send the deed. I've seen zoning fraud before. They're too confident. It means they skip something. Let me find out what. Clay hesitated, hovering over the upload. Then he thought about the next letter. The next deputy. The next insult masked as paperwork. He clicked attach, sent the deed, sent the HOA complaint, waited. Eli replied 10 minutes later with 4 words that hit harder than any legal threat he'd gotten so far. That they messed up somewhere. And just like that, Clay wasn't alone anymore. Eli didn't just look into the case. He dug into it. Clay figured he'd hear back in a week, maybe 2. Some email with legal jargon or a polite message saying nothing could be done. Instead, Eli called him the next morning at 8:03 a.m., sounding like he'd slept at his desk. I'm going to need everything, he said without preamble. Plat maps, boundary surveys, old title docs, anything your family might have kept. If there's a drawer full of dusty manila folders, I want it. Clay blinked. You always call clients before breakfast? I haven't had clients like this before, Eli said. But I've had zoning nightmares. And this one's singing off key already. Over the next 2 weeks, Eli went full bloodhound. He filed public record requests in 3 counties. He dug through 1,970 Planning Commission memos, scanned into ancient municipal databases. He emailed the state assessor's office twice, then called them when they didn't respond. He even drove 3 hours to an off-site records facility that kept physical zoning board minutes in a temperature-controlled vault. Every time Clay checked his inbox, there was a new message from Eli, screenshots of overlapping parcel maps, questions about the orchard line, the name of the surveyor who signed the 1991 lot certification. Clay didn't have answers to half of it, but he kept sending what he could find. Old tax statements, a weathered title abstract, even a birthday card his father once wrote that included a hand-drawn sketch of the back fence. Then Eli called. His voice was calm, but only on the surface. Underneath, it buzzed with something that sounded a lot like adrenaline. I found something. Good or bad? Both, Eli said. Depends on who you are. Try me. There was a boundary adjustment filed in 1986 by the developer that owned the land behind you at the time. They restructured several parcels for future subdivision plans. The county approved it, but no one ever filed it with the state assessor's office. No. So the county thinks you own 10 acres, but the state never formally signed off on that change. And here's where it gets weird. A pause. Papers rustling in the background. I found your father's original deed, filed in 1973. It outlines the purchase of a single 25-acre parcel, full, undivided. His name is on it, His survey coordinates match your current land, and the back 15 acres were never legally separated. Clay didn't speak. He just stood there, phone pressed to his ear, looking out at the orchard like he was seeing it for the first time again. "I think," Eli continued, voice rising, "your dad never filed the boundary revision locally because it meant a bigger tax bill. So he paid on 10 acres but legally held 25. Quietly. Smart. But it means you may own everything from your fence to the back end of the subdivision." Clay sat down. Slowly. "You telling me they built their damn neighborhood on my land?" "I'm telling you," Eli said, "they're suing you for land you already own, and they might have built 80 homes on it without the legal right to do so." Silence. Then a slow exhale from Clay. "I knew my old man hated paperwork. Just didn't know he was that clever." Eli chuckled. "This could get huge, but we'll need proof, certified records, an updated survey. We're going to need to push this into the light, fast." Clay looked out at the rows of rooftops rising past his orchard. For the first time in months, he wasn't afraid of them. He was wondering what it would feel like to own them. Eli didn't text it, didn't email. He got in his car before sunrise, filled a thermos with gas station coffee, and drove 3 hours north to the state archives himself. Clay didn't even know he was gone until noon. The place wasn't digital, not fully. It was the kind of building where records lived in boxes, not on servers, where drawers creaked, where papers yellowed, where secrets waited for someone with enough obsession to come dig them out. Eli signed in at the front desk, told the clerk he was looking for historical land use records under parcel ID 14A, originally filed in 1973, amended in 1986, but with a suspected filing gap. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "That's a deep one." Eli grinned. "I'm a lawyer. I like deep." 3 hours later, his fingers were black with ink and dust. His eyes were burning from overhead fluorescence. He'd flipped through plat overlays, boundary declarations, assessor summaries, dozens of thin manila folders in drawers that hadn't been touched in decades. And then he found it. Bottom drawer, back of the file room. A rolled-up blueprint, wedged between floodplain maps and defunct utility sketches. It was stamped parcel, 14A full extent. Rivers holding, 1973. No annotations, no adjustments, no division lines. Just one large continuous plot, 25 acres, stretching from the gravel road to the far end of the subdivision. Clay's father had never split it. The 1986 boundary adjustment had never been certified. The developer had parceled, built, paved, and sold homes on land that was never legally theirs. Eli took pictures, front and back, every inch. Then he asked the clerk to copy the entire thing and notarize a record of access. It was nearly dark when he got back to his car. He called Clay before even starting the engine. Clay picked up after 2 rings. He was in the barn cleaning rust off a tiller, hands still greasy. "Yeah?" Eli's voice was electric. "I found it. State Archives, original parcel map. Clay, it's all yours. Your dad never filed the reduction. The county map is wrong. You don't own 10 acres, Clay." A pause. "You own 25. Clay didn't speak for a long time. He just looked out the barn door, over the property he thought he knew. The orchard, the creek, the hills beyond that fence, and the rows of identical rooftops that had sprouted like weeds past the back tree line. He remembered the surveyors, the trucks, the woman in the Prius, and the envelope that said, "Your parcel will not be affected." Finally, Clay said it. Low, measured, heavy, in their trespassing. Eli filed the counterclaim on a Monday. It was simple, elegant, and devastating. Baton Rivers versus Silverwood Estates, HOA and Affiliated Development Group, LLC. Allegation: unauthorized occupation and sale of private land, 15+ acres. Estimated damages to be determined. He didn't bury them in paperwork. He sharpened it to a knife. Within 48 hours, the filing was public, and the media found it. The headline hit first on a local site, HOL, sues elderly Texan. Turns out, he may own the entire subdivision. By the end of the week, it was national. David V's developer. The fence that started a firestorm. Rural man fights back, and he has the deed. Cable news anchors said his name wrong. Opinion hosts argued zoning laws they barely understood. Twitter threads speculated whether Clay would bulldoze the neighborhood or demand back rent. Clay didn't say much, but the reporters kept coming. They parked outside his gate in dusty SUVs and rental cars, with satellite dishes mounted to the roof. They shouted questions through the bars. Boone barked at all of them, like they were the same person wearing different shoes. Clay built a second fence inside the first, just to have peace while feeding the chickens. One morning, Eli called with a warning. "You're a story now, Clay. It's out of our hands. We'll control the legal side, but people are going to twist this. Be ready." Clay hung up and walked back outside. A crew from Austin had set up a tripod just beyond the tree line. He walked up to them and said nothing for a moment, just stared. The cameraman looked nervous. The anchor smiled too much. "We're live in an hour. Any chance you'll make a statement, Mr. Rivers?" Clay looked at the camera, then at the homes rising behind it. He said exactly one sentence. They picked a fight with the wrong man and walked away. Behind the scenes, things started to fall apart. The HOA president resigned without notice. The developers, city officials scrambled to hold emergency coordination sessions trying to figure out who approved what and when. Eli, meanwhile, filed a second motion. He wanted a court-ordered land audit, not just of Clay's property, but of the entire Silverwood Estate's footprint. At first, the judge hesitated. Then the media pressure cracked the walls. The audit was approved. Surveyors showed up with clipboards and GIS scanners. The same kind of men who once planted flags on Clay's land now walked the subdivision measuring everything: fences, easements, building pads. They said nothing to the residents, just worked silently as homeowners peeked nervously from behind curtains. The HOA issued a memo. Please remain calm while county contractors perform routine verifications. But the truth was leaking through every lot line. Some people whispered about pulling out. Others called their realtors in a panic. And Clay? He stayed where he was, 10 steps from his porch, watching it all happen from behind the fence they told him was illegal. The one he now knew was the only legal thing standing. The hearing was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. By 8:15, the parking lot was full. Reporters leaned against camera tripods outside the courthouse. Curious neighbors, some from Clay's side of the fence, some from Silverwood Estates, murmured in the hallway, pretending they weren't there to watch a man put a whole subdivision on trial. Clay walked in wearing his only suit, dark gray, clean but old. Eli stood beside him, navy blue tie, laptop bag slung over his shoulder like it was a sword. Neither of them smiled. They didn't need to. The courtroom filled fast. People sat shoulder to shoulder. Court clerks whispered to one another. A reporter scribbled the word landowner in bold across her notepad. The judge entered, glasses low on his nose, gavel already in hand. "This matter is now in session," he said. And then, everything Clay had endured, every sleepless night, every letter, every insult wrapped in bureaucracy, finally had a voice. Eli stood first. No theatrics, no yelling, just files, dates, lines on maps. He started with the 1973 deed, the full parcel description. He walked through every tax year since, explaining how Clay's father had reported only part of the acreage to avoid heavy assessments. Then came the unfiled 1986 boundary adjustment. Then came the state parcel map. Then the AUG. Then the satellite overlay. Finally, an affidavit, handwritten, notarized, and backed by property records, from Clay's father's old business partner, confirming the original 25-acre sale and intent to keep it whole. It was surgical, precise, undeniable. Eli stepped back, eyes level with the judge. The defendants not only trespassed, they built, sold, and zoned an entire neighborhood on land they never had legal title to. They didn't just file it wrong, they never filed it at all. The judge said nothing yet, but his eyes had narrowed. Then the HOA's lawyer stood up, tall, polished, aggressive, the kind of man who smiled when he spoke, even when it wasn't funny. "This is a social media case, Your Honor," he began. "Mr. Navarro here has built his brand off viral outrage. What we have is a confusion of documentation, not malice." He turned toward the crowd. "Too much. Let's not let TikTok lawyers rewrite land use law." Clay sat still, then he stood. His voice didn't waver. "That influencer," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "just proved I own your damn clubhouse." Laughter, gasps. A woman in the back whispered, "Oh my God." The judge banged his gavel once. "Order!" The courtroom fell into a nervous hum, but something had already shifted. Eli didn't smile, but he didn't need to. Outside, the reporters were already filing updates. Inside, the judge picked up the folder, and Clay sat back down, one hand resting on his knee, the other calmly gripping the table edge. Because now the evidence wasn't in question. Only the consequences were. It didn't happen all at once. The fall of Silverwood Estates began the way a dam breaks, quiet cracks behind closed doors, then everything rushing out in a single public collapse. 3 days after the hearing, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Residents packed the clubhouse, tension thick in the air. A few board members tried to explain it away. Misfiled paperwork, misunderstood boundaries. Nothing was final, but the audit had already been released. Every homeowner had read it. The map was now public. Over 80 homes built partially or fully on land Clay owned. The first resignation came that night. By the end of the week, 5 more followed. One board member left the state, another deleted her Facebook and disconnected her phone. Clay didn't have to say a word. The HOA was eating itself. The developer filed for bankruptcy within 2 weeks. The moment the judge refused to issue a stay, they folded. Their offices shuttered overnight. Employees were laid off by email. Their lawyers stopped returning calls. The builder who once offered Clay a landscaping voucher after construction dust ruined his orchard, now hiding behind corporate restructuring. And then came the call from City Hall. As a city official, voice tight, scripted, offered Clay a settlement on behalf of a special intermunicipal recovery fund, $15 million. Taxpayer-backed, no admission of fault, just an invitation to resolve the matter peacefully and preserve neighborhood stability. Clay didn't answer right away. He passed the phone to Eli. Eli listened, nodded, took notes. Lynn said plainly, "Clay says no." Silence on the other end. Eli leaned forward in his chair, tapped the folder containing the court audit. "We'll settle for 50. The line went dead. The media lost its mind. Headlines screamed across the state. Man declines $15.00. M deal wants justice, not hush money. Entire neighborhood built on wrong land. Developer bankrupt, city exposed. They laughed at his fence. Now he owns their streets. National outlets picked it up again. Legal analysts debated live on air. A local news anchor dubbed Clay's land the billion-dollar mistake. But the ripple was bigger than Clay. Within a month, other HOAs across Texas started quietly auditing their records. Some found minor discrepancies, others didn't say what they found, but hired outside legal counsel. A real estate firm in Austin released a blog post, "The Rivers Effect. Are your HOA lines actually legal?" Legislators whispered about oversight reform. One county commissioner called it the most embarrassing land use case in state history. And through it all, Clay stayed quiet. No victory lap. No press tour. Just the same man sitting on his porch, watching Boone chase butterflies, sipping coffee while lawyers scrambled to fix what should never have been broken. The final offer came by courier. No more emails, no more phone calls, just a white envelope hand-delivered to Eli's office with 3 official seals pressed into the flap: City, County, and Federal Land Remediation Fund. Inside, a signed agreement. $15 million 0 cents in total compensation, funded through a complex blend of municipal insurance, developer bond forfeitures, and a federal land misuse program designed for exactly this kind of bureaucratic failure. No one would admit fault, but no one had to. The payout said everything. Clay reviewed every line at the kitchen table. Boone lay beside him, half asleep. The old wind chimes in the peach tree rattled softly in the breeze. He read slow, then again, then once more, because land taken in silence deserves to be reclaimed in full understanding. The deal gave him options. He'd keep 5 acres. The original home, the orchard, the chicken coop his son helped rebuild, the tree where his wife's wind chimes still hung. The other 20 acres, now paved over, parceled out, and mapped in suburbia, those he would sell. But on his terms. No HOA, no easements, no exceptions. The title had to acknowledge what it always should have. Private property, former Rivers Estate, recovered 2025. When he signed, the city didn't smile, but they didn't push back either. They just nodded, because everyone in the room knew what had happened and what it cost to get there. The HOA disbanded 3 days later. Their charter dissolved. Their bank account emptied. Homeowners sued the former board for misrepresentation and breach of fiduciary duty. At least 2 lawsuits named the former president personally. One neighbor claimed she'd lost $60,000, 0 cents in home value, because no one bothered to check a boundary line. And Clay, he became the largest private land payout recipient in state history. A number of reporters whispered like it was sacred. A few neighbors tried to wave when they saw him at the mailbox. He didn't wave back, not out of anger, just principle. Because if it took $15 million to remind them whose land this always was, then waving would feel cheap. The subdivision still stands. The houses didn't vanish, the fences didn't fall, the mail still comes and the kids still ride scooters. But now they know where the line is. And who drew it? Clay rebuilt, not the house. He left the old one standing like a monument. But deep in the woods, past the orchard, beyond where even the city maps used to stop, he and his son framed a new cabin. Simple, 1 story, wide porch, tin roof. They dug a pond nearby, stocked it with bass. He adopted a second dog, a quiet rescue with uneven ears. Boone took to her like they'd known each other in another life. Sometimes, in the early morning light, Clay walks to the edge of the fence, the new one, the one that stayed. He places a hand on the post, lets the breeze settle against his face, and whispers, not for anyone else to hear, "You didn't take it, you never could. If you believe in standing your ground, if you believe that the little guy still matters and that the truth when protected can still win, then make sure to subscribe for more HOA stories. See you in the next one."